Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution.
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 You want a revolution?
You say you want a revolution?
Revolution. The revolution.
It's going on right now.
Welcome to The Revolution, the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we ask today's most successful entrepreneurs to share the tools and strategies they use to build relationships and connections to grow their revenue. Now, your host for The Revolution, John Corcoran.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here, and I'm the host of this show. And, every week I get to talk to interesting founders, CEOs, entrepreneurs, and every once in a while I get to talk to a really interesting founder, really interesting entrepreneur that has a shared background with me. A couple of my past guests, Warren Rustin, David Anderson, overlapped in the political world on both sides of the aisle. And this guest is a similar kind of background story. His name is Gordon James. And Gordon has a fascinating background. He became friends with President George H.W. Bush dating back to the late 1970s. He spent 20 years in a variety of different business and political positions. After the 1988 presidential election, he joined President George H.W. Bush's staff at the White House, serving as lead advance representative for the president and also director of invitations and ticketing for the 51st Presidential Inaugural Committee. And then in 1990, he established Gordon C. James Public Relations as a full-service media relations, event management, and governmental affairs agency. He also was really involved in President George W. Bush's elections and inaugurals in 2000 and 2004. So we're going to talk all about that background and also how it relates to the work that he's done in the business sector as well. So it'll be a pleasure to talk to him about that. Of course, this episode is brought to you by Rise 25 Media, where we help B2B businesses to get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with done-for-you podcasts and content marketing. Go to rise25media.com. You can learn all about it. All right, Gordon, it's such a pleasure to have you here. First of all, quick shout out to David Anderson of Off Madison Ave. He introduced us, and with our shared background, both having worked in the White House and around all these big presidential campaigns, there's so many things that I want to ask you about. But first, let's start with your first introduction to President George H.W. Bush. I believe it was 1978, and you didn't have a lot of experience in the political world, but you were kind of smitten, let's say. So tell us the story.
Well, I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, but I married a girl from Iowa, and I ended up in Des Moines, Iowa, in the property management business of all things. And my former commanding officer in the Iowa Army National Guard called me, and George Wickraft called me and said, I have a guy running for president, and we need some office space in downtown Des Moines. And as you know, Iowa is the first caucus and a big deal, and we get candidates from all over the country coming in there. And I'm anxious to rent to them. And I just had a perfect spot. And I said, well, who is it? He says, George Bush. And I went, who the heck is he? And he said, oh, you know him. He's the head of the CIA and the party chairman. And I said, well, I don't really know him, but I'm happy to rent him. I've got a perfect spot in the Insurance Exchange building at 5th and Grand in downtown Des Moines. And so we struck a deal. And about several months later, then ambassador, we called him because he had been the envoy to Beijing and China. Ambassador Bush came to Des Moines, and I met him in the lobby of the Insurance Exchange building, and something clicked. I just went, wow, this guy is something else. And
was it something about his charisma? Was it something he said to you? Can you think back about what it was?
I'm not sure he said anything to me. It was just his presence. And I'm sure I shook hands with him and met him, but there was just something unique about him. And
sometimes that's probably one of the top questions I've gotten over the years is, what was Bill Clinton like in person? And it's hard sometimes to separate the man from the office, because they always come with a entourage of dozens of people around them, and that in itself is impressive. But I've also been around presidential candidates who have an entourage around them and don't strike me that way. I can think of a number who didn't end up getting elected. So, it's hard to tell sometimes what it is, though, what it is about charisma. It's kind of ephemeral.
Well, he had no entourage.
Interesting.
I know George Whitcraft picked him up at the airport and brought him to Fifth and Grand, and there was nobody.
Wow. Okay.
We had gathered some political activists, which I was not one of, to meet him.
The property manager.
I was the property manager. Right. I was the building super. And
what's interesting about that, I have to say, also, is that if there are political activists around, some political leaders would have just gravitated to them and ignored the property manager guy. But you still felt like he cared about you or something because it made such an impression.
Definitely. I definitely felt like I wanted to be a part of this man's life and career. And it just started there. And as you know, as you may remember, George H.W. Bush won the Iowa caucus. President Reagan chose not to participate, and Ambassador Bush won, of all things. He went on to win a couple of more states, but it fizzled out as the summer progressed. And I actually kind of lost track of where he was and don't remember thinking much about it until the convention. Because
the party kind of moves on from your state to other states. Yeah. Unless you go with it, then you lose track, especially back then without 24-hour news.
Iowa was a flyover state after the caucuses.
Yeah.
So anyway, he became the vice presidential nominee, and Reagan Bush won in 80. And I really wasn't able to do much after that. I had 3 kids at home and a real job. And I was named treasurer of Reagan Bush in Iowa, which absolutely meant nothing. I couldn't sign checks. I couldn't do anything. It was just kind of a funny little title. But as 1987 rolled around in 1986 and 1987.
Well, hold on. Before we get to that, I think there's a story in your book about you get a call from the White House. I think this is 1981, shortly after George H.W. Bush takes office as vice president, and then you accompany him on a trip.
I joined the advance team on the trip. Doug McKenzie, a dear friend of mine, still to this day, was the lead advance. I had no idea what I was getting involved in.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, what is advance?
We would go domestically. We would travel about 5 to 6 days ahead of the vice president and make all the arrangements for his visit, including, the venue and how it was all going to work, where he was going to speak or who he was going to meet with, who was going to greet him right down to who was going to greet him at the plane. We would join a team of the United States Secret Service, White House Communications, White House Travel Office, and there would be probably on a domestic trip, probably 100 people involved in the team. Air Force One advance, all the agencies involved in moving a vice president and president of the United States.
Or Air Force Two back then.
Air Force Two.
Yeah.
But our main job was to create a visual. And I had no idea how to do that. I really.
I was going to say, naturally, your background in property management, that was the perfect training.
So when the plane arrived and I wanted to get in the limo with the vice president, he was a friend of mine, I didn't know you were supposed to ride in the staff van.
Not everyone.
Anyway, that was my first exposure to advanced work. And
clearly you liked it and you had some ability for it because you made it your career for many years.
I don't know. I learned on the fly, and I had some great mentors, Sig Rogish, Bruce Zanka, Tony Benedy. I had some people that really taught me how to do it and really told me what would be, at that time, there were newspapers. Remember those newspapers? And our goal was to have a picture of Vice President of the United States above the fold on the front page of the fold. That's the fold.
Right.
With
The fold of the newspaper, right? Right. That was that was what was so important about Advance. And you actually have a picture of one of the worst pictures of Advance of all time, which is a picture of Mike Dukakis. Those who are my age or older will probably remember this. It's a picture of Mike Dukakis in a tank. I think he's got his tie is a little bit askew, and with a label across this helmet that says Mike Dukakis, and it looks utterly ridiculous.
That's what we wanted to avoid.
Yeah.
I also think there's a picture in there of Vice President Bush holding a piglet. So that was a famous one. I mean, the Dukakis team they had their bad days, but I had my bad days too.
Yeah, he had, I don't know if you were involved. Wasn't there a supermarket visit at one point with George H.W. Bush too, where he kind of got an unfair shake, but I think he was examining how the scanner worked or something, and the press said that he was out of touch with regular, Americans buying their groceries or something like that.
Oh yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, my rule was never to laugh at another Advance team's foul ups, because the same thing could happen to you just as easily.
Yeah, it's very easily.
Very easily. So I felt sorry for the Dukakis people. If you remember the story, his team recommended he not do it, and he just thought it would be fun to get in a tank and ride around. So
yeah, it ends up defining a whole campaign too when that sort of thing happens. Yeah. I was involved in it a little bit in the 2004 election, and I remember being around Howard Dean, and Howard Dean, probably one of the most energizing speakers I've seen, and I've seen Clinton and Obama, and I've seen all kinds of amazing speakers. He could light up a room like crazy, and then of course he's famous for this scream which happened in Iowa. After he came in second or third, I think, in the Iowa caucuses. And part of that might have been because of the sound, a sound issue with the microphone. And so it just ended up sounding nutty, Yeah. Yeah.
Listen, if it can go wrong, it will go wrong.
Right.
You just have to be on the lookout for every possible mistake.
So you work on the 1988 campaign, of course. President George H.W. Bush is elected, and then you go on to work on the inaugural. And what was that like, working on the inaugural?
Let me give you a tip. When Steve Sutter asks you to be a director of the inaugural in charge of invitations, say no. You either got 10 invitations or you got none. And it was, the technology and creating a list and whatnot was not near what it is today. And
master database keeping track of all the.
Oh yeah, we had all that, but it just wasn't as sophisticated as it is today. And then we had, you didn't get your ticket. You didn't have a ticket on your phone. You had a hard copy, a beautiful ticket to the events. They were stunning, and people really wanted to have them. And we FedExed millions of them out, it seemed like, but there was a huge will call when people showed up in Washington, D.C., and they would come to a hotel and pick up their tickets at a will call. And it was a nightmare. I think everybody finally got situated and got their tickets, but I vowed never to be involved in that process again.
Well, you were involved in a couple more inaugurals after that, just not ticketing.
Oh, yeah. Yes, but I was a director of events in both of them.
Yeah, give me a different job, please.
And I would walk by the person in charge of ticketing and invitations and whatnot, and I go, "Are you doing all right?" I felt so sorry for him.
So you founded your company, Gordon C. James Public Relations, in 1990. So that's midway through President George H.W. Bush's term. What inspired you to, kind of walk away from politics and start a company?
I needed to get out of the cycle. I was still paying tuitions at private colleges, and I needed to have a steady income. Also my big three kids were no longer living at home. They were on their own or still in college, and it was just a good time to do it. I actually named it Gordon C. James Public Relations, not having a clue what that meant, really. I wasn't sure what the product was that I would be selling. And we were so lucky to get to work for M&M Mars and Snickers brand. They were terrific teachers and really taught us the commercial communications game.
It's very different, isn't it? I made the transition myself, working in politics. It's not the same thing trying to get a picture above the fold of, a president or a vice president or a senator or a governor. And, you have all the press that shows up versus, a private business that's selling candy or whatever.
Right.
It's a totally different game in order to get attention for that.
And this was before Facebook and Snap. It was before social media. We were actually faxing to when the teams would come to the national championship or the regional tournaments. One of our colleagues would fax the results of the scores to their hometown papers. Fax them.
Wow.
I don't even know if you can find a fax machine today.
Right.
And that's how we got coverage in the local papers. And the big challenge was getting the word Snickers in the story. Snickers USU Soccer Western Regional Championship,
Yeah.
But they were just pros. They could sell. Imagine anywhere in the world where you can't buy a Snickers bar. It's just impossible.
Right. A good client to have.
It was a great client, and we worked for them for 10 years. And I'm forever grateful for that opportunity.
Yeah. You get drawn back into politics, though. It's one of those kind of like The Godfather. Once you're in, or they won't. What's the saying? I forget what the saying is. They pull you back in, basically.
Oh yeah. And when I was asked to do one of the first events in Iowa for George W. Bush and the Iowa Fairgrounds, and we had the standard pork chop cookout. And when we got done with the event and we got to the airport, W got me in a headlock and said, "You in, boy, now, right?" And I said, "I'm in, sir." That was 1999, and he was governor of Texas. And
what was he like compared to his father?
Well, we had been friends all during his dad's run.
Because he was involved in his dad's campaign, so you probably knew him. Yeah.
Oh, he was the enforcer. He was the loyalty enforcer, and we were great friends, and just enjoyed each other very much. And of course, I was just chomping at the bit to help him on his run. Yeah.
Was it unusual, or was it strange or odd getting back into the game 10 years later after having run your company all these years?
No. And I had continued to work for George W. Bush, H.W. Bush, and had traveled to Vietnam with him and helped him with his speaking engagements all over the country. And so I hadn't lost my desire to do this kind of work. I was still excited to do it.
And then what about the company? So what happened to your company when you started to get involved back in politics?
It kept going, and our clients were loyal to us. And I think some of them were anticipating, well, maybe this guy would have some glue in the next administration.
Sure.
And they wanted to stay close. And we were much smaller then, employee-wise, so our overhead wasn't too terribly high.
A little more flexibility that way, I guess.
A little more flexibility, and we were getting paid also. By the campaign. So.
Got it. Oh, well, that makes it easier too. Yep. So then you are involved in both inaugurals, the 2000 and 2004 inaugurals. How was that? Hopefully, that was a better experience than the first inaugural.
Oh, much better. And it was a joy. And by then, we had senior Bush people that were very experienced, that could jump in. And then we had Hargrove, which had done inaugural since Harry Truman. So we had our decorators and our sound and light people, and we had technology to help us. So I think it went a lot smoother. It went much smoother as far as I was concerned, at least. I hope the attendees that came in had a good time. But we had some very experienced people that could jump in and devote 60 days straight to putting it on and getting ready for January 20th, 2001, right. January 20th, 2005.
Right. Did you do advanced trips after 9/11?
Actually, I was with the president for UNGA, United Nations General Assembly, about 3 weeks after 9/11. They went ahead and scheduled their meetings, and I went down to Ground Zero several times, and it was a very moving experience. It was every time they would find someone, they would sound a horn, and everything would stop until they had taken that person away. And it was tough, very tough.
It must have been a moving experience.
Yeah.
Tell me about 2004. In 2004, you spent more than 5 months in Baghdad. This is shortly after the Second Iraq War, which was in 2003. You were advanced director for the Coalition Provisional Authority. Must have been a precarious security situation in retrospect. What was that like?
Well, my buddy Carl Rove came to Phoenix and was complaining about communications coming out of the war, which had already been started months before. He said, "Boy, I really need some help." And I said, "Well, I'd go." And he go, "Well, you're gone." And about 3 weeks later, we were gone. And Greg Edgar, my business partner here in Phoenix, we left and we went to Baghdad and set up our operation just like a normal. We tried to set up a White House caliber advance operation for Ambassador Brimmer. And then our job was to create events showing the transition back to the Iraqis. The coalition was going to go out of business on July 1st, and it was a firm date. We were committed from the minute we got there to July 1st that was going to be the end of the coalition's existence, which was 20 some countries, and our main partners were the Brits. And it was a unique experience. It's great to be with our troops on a daily basis. They just do such a terrific job. And it's different than when I got drafted into the Army in 1969. I had no intentions of being involved in the Vietnam War. And I was able to get in a National Guard unit and didn't deploy to Vietnam, but we didn't wear our uniforms in public. People would, scorn us. And these young men and women that were serving during 2004, and they had made a choice to enlist in the military. They didn't get drafted. They made a conscious choice. And they were just
probably the ones who were there around then. Many of them maybe because of 9/11 had enlisted, perhaps.
Oh, for sure. We were there when a football player from Arizona.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
When he was killed.
Oh, wow.
So I will tell you that I depended upon them for my safety, and I appreciated it very much. And we were able to do our job all over the country. We went everywhere. And we were flown by the Arizona Air National Guard helicopter group. That's who took us around. And I've thanked them many times since. They're right around the corner here in Phoenix, where I live. And it was a terrific experience. And I think we made a difference. I don't know, we took a lot of criticism. When I came back, my job was to give speeches around Arizona about what progress we'd made. And I got a lot of people telling me, it was stupid, that we shouldn't have been there, that there was no more weapons of mass destructions. And when General Powell passed away the other day, the story about him at the UN and how he felt terrible about that. He felt like he had been misguided by our security team. I will tell you a story about him, though. He came to Baghdad. He came to Baghdad and for a visit. And the day before he got there, there were 2 Iraqi news people that had breached the security at the Baghdad International Airport, and they were killed. The coalition forces killed them. They didn't respond to
journalists. 2 journalists.
2 journalists.
Wow.
And so the next.
And Colin Powell, was he Secretary of State at the time, or is he?
He was Secretary of State.
Okay.
And he arrived in the morning, and we had an event in one of the mess halls in the Green Zone, where he thanked all the people that were there for all the good work they were doing. And then we went over to the convention center and had a massive press conference, huge. There were press from all over the world there. And right when he took the podium, all of the Iraqi press, which, believe me, there weren't Iraqi press until Saddam Hussein was taken out of power. They didn't exist. They got up en masse and walked out in protest over what had happened the day before. And of course, we were mortified, and I was mortified. But General Powell, he took control and he said, look, that's why we're here. That's why we're here. Freedom of the press. This would never have been allowed under Saddam Hussein. These people would have been imprisoned or worse, executed for what they just did. But that's why we're here.
Wow. What did your
changed the whole tone of the thing? And he took a very tough situation and turned it into a positive. And I'll never forget him for that.
Yeah. What did your family say when you said, I'm going to Baghdad for a few months?
Well, I had said I'm going to places all. Lisa and I, by then had 4 more children, so we had 7 total.
Wow.
And
I assume you didn't take them.
No. I think my son, one of my sons, was very concerned, and it bothered him more than anybody, but they were used to me leaving and for extended periods of time. It was very selfish on my part, actually. But they were used to this scene.
Yeah.
And
I just went to a conference for the first time in 2 years for 3 days, and I have 4 kids, and I felt horrendously guilty leaving my wife taking care of the kids.
Well, can you imagine leaving for 5 months?
I know, I couldn't. Yeah.
But we had a terrific phone system there, and I was able to call Lisa every day and check in with her and check in with all the kids. And at night, when we would wind down our operations, we would turn our phones over to the Marines that were there and let them call home. And we really had a great communications system. It was just like being in the States.
Wow. That's impressive. That's impressive. Yeah.
Stay in touch.
I want to ask you also about a few years later, a year later, February 2005, you were lead advance representative when President George H.W. Bush and President Bill Clinton toured the Maldives, which was affected by a tsunami. And it's easy to forget, here we are in 2021, political discourse seems hopelessly divided, but it's easy to forget that President Bush and President Clinton, who had a very challenging campaign, bitterly fought campaign in 1992, became good friends and embarked on a number of different humanitarian efforts in the years after they'd both left office. So tell us about that experience.
Well, it was incredible. We got a call from the State Department, actually, and they said, would you help with this trip? We're going to do a fundraising trip with President Clinton and President Bush in the Maldives. And of course, the Maldives suffered the worst in the tsunami. Thousands and thousands of people drowned and died. And so we deployed, and I got to go to a resort, believe it or not, that had opened right away.
What a disconnect to go to this place where there's horrendous death, and then I've seen it before. I've seen pictures. I haven't visited, but it's beautiful. So it's like heaven on earth.
It's beautiful, and but there was debris still floating by, and there was still a huge operation on trying to identify people and keeping track and letting family members know about their loved ones that they'd lost. It was a very sad situation. And of course, there was in other parts of the islands, there was total devastation. And we toured all of that in anticipation of the president's arrival. They got along just terrifically. And President Clinton was so deferential to President Bush. He gave him there was on the plane that took them, there was a bedroom. And President Clinton stayed up all night and played. He liked to play rummy with his colleagues and friends, and he played cards all night. And President Bush slept in the bed. So but they just got along. They get along perfect, just great. Yeah. I will tell you that when we were departing one area going to another by boat, and the two presidents separated, and the Maldivians went nuts over President Clinton and could hardly give President George H.W. the wink of an eye. And the president and I were standing there watching President Clinton with all these people gathered around him. And we just went, well, he's a rock star. And they knew exactly who he was. And they loved him very much. But
in fairness, he hadn't been out of office for many years at that point. It was a little bit more recent news. Yeah. I did a few advanced trips, both when I was in the White House and also when I worked in the governor's office in California. And one of the cool things about it is you get to be a fly on the wall behind the scenes, in the green room, and you get to hear these intimate conversations or important conversations. And it's just amazing. Are there any, that you can share, of course, are there any, stories or experiences like that you can share from that we wouldn't normally see on CNN or Fox News or any of those places?
I'm going to let you in on one. We were on a long foreign trip, and Secretary Baker, who was President George H.W. Bush's best friend, the two of them were they were together. Secretary Baker was on the trip with us. And we finished a long day, and there was two suites, and they had an adjoining living room. And President Bush had one, and Secretary Baker had the other. Now President Bush enjoyed a glass of vodka every once in a while, and Secretary Baker also did. And I could hear them laughing and talking well into the wee hours of the morning. And we had an extremely early call the next day, I think 7 a.m. or something ridiculous. And I thought, these guys are not going to answer the bell. They have been up talking and carousing all night long, and they are just not going to make it.
Are you like sleeping down the hall? How do you hear
I was sleeping down the hall, but I was roaming the halls, and,
okay.
And I could just hear them in there.
You didn't go knock on the door and say, guys, go to bed.
That would be correct. I did not, John. I did not go knock on the door. Anyway, the appointed hour came, and I'm standing out in front of the door, and I'm thinking, there's no way. And there they were, both of them.
Wow.
Bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, ready to go.
Pros.
And we had another 12-hour day looking us in the face, and they just were perfect. So I don't ever remember hearing them talking about anything classified or anything like that. But I remember just how much fun President Bush had with all of his friends, and how they enjoyed each other, and how he kept them close all those years,
Did you go skydiving with him? Any of the skydives?
I did. I was in Yuma with the team, and
so by way of background, for those who don't know, after he left office, President George H.W. Bush jumped out of a couple airplanes to mark different significant experiences. The first one, I believe, was to recreate when he got shot down famously. And I think it was it in the Korean Wars or World War II?
World War II.
World War II. He got shot down.
1945. Yeah,
he got shot down.
Shot
so
down
he had to
and parachuted in.
And there was famous video footage of him being pulled up or climbing up onto an aircraft carrier after he was rescued. So apparently for like 50 years, he wanted to do it again. And finally, after he leaves office, he goes and does it again, which I thought was so cool.
He did. We went to Yuma, to the air station there in Yuma, Arizona. And he was briefed and given about a 15-minute lesson on jumping out of airplanes. And he said to me, Gordon, would you like to go with me? And I went, no, I have no desire to do this. So Mrs. Bush and I were standing on the ground waiting. And so it was I believe it was the Golden Angels Navy team that was with him. And this was the only jump he did where he was not harnessed to one of the professionals.
Oh, was that first one? He wasn't harnessed? It was all on his... Really? Wow.
They had a hold of him on each side, and then they let him go. And I kept looking up, and here were the Golden Knights coming down, and I could see the canopies. And I looked up, and there was this gigantic canopy. Had to have been 20 feet across, and there was the president coming down all by himself. It was an extra big canopy. But it was kind of a trainer canopy, you know.
Yeah. I'm sure they took extra caution. They took extra caution. They're like, we are not messing up this one for sure. And then he did it, I think, on his 80th birthday and his 90th birthday, I believe, also.
Oh yeah. He thought that was quite fun. And
if he was still alive today, he probably would go up with Jeff Bezos into space. You know, I think
he'd have been on that trip for sure.
Oh yeah, I'm sure I could have seen that. Yeah. You told a touching story in the book about James Baker, who was there with President Bush when he passed.
Yes. And Secretary Baker was absolutely the closest friend the president had. And they known each other since they were in their 20s. And Secretary Baker got a call that the president was close, and he went over and the president said, Jimmy, where are we going? Secretary said, we're going to heaven, Mr. President. He was rubbing his feet and the president passed away.
The memorial service for President Bush, those are always really moving. My grandfather was a B-17 pilot in World War II, and he's buried at Arlington now. And there was like no one left when he died. And so it was like me and our very small family. It was so moving. The soldiers that were there and gave him a salute and full on like ceremony, as if there were hundreds of people watching. So I can only imagine what President George H.W. Bush's funeral was like.
Well, I got to attend the service at the cathedral in downtown Washington, D.C. And the night before, we'd had a big party at the United States Chamber of Commerce building. And it was like a old fraternity reunion. All of our friends were there. And but the day of this service was sad, and we were all pretty down. And the service ended, and the families walked down the center aisle to depart behind the casket. And George W. Bush was high-fiving everybody and yelling out and calling names. And I was sitting with Ambassador Moley and Dorothy Moley, and he yelled, Moley, Moley. He was yelling at him, and Kevin high-fived him, and it just changed the whole thing. We all felt like, we had some closure.
That's nice.
Because we were down in the dumps, believe me. And but President Bush saved the day.
Well, I think I know the answer to my final question, which is, I'm a big fan of gratitude. And if you look around at your peers and contemporaries, others in your industry, people who you respect and admire, who would you acknowledge? And I can imagine who the answer would be.
Well, of course, my mentor was George H.W. Bush, and he took me when I was at my worst. I was at the end of my rope, and he trusted me and taught me how to work. He taught me how to put in a full day's work, and he taught me respect. He taught me a trade, which I never thought I would be. 31 years later, still have my agency and still be married. So,
with 7 kids,
have
no
the
less.
respect of my children, and so I owe him my life for sure. I have one other gentleman, Jim Myers, who I met when I was living in Iowa, who was a mentor and coach. And when I told him I was going to start my own agency and go off on my own, he was probably the only person that believed in me, that I could do it. As a matter of fact, on our 20th anniversary, I got a letter from George Herbert Walker Bush that says, who would have thunk that this would last this long? And but Jim Myers was someone who believed in me and was a great help to me on the early years.
Yeah, it's cool to hear the story about a letter having such a big impact, because I wrote some of those types of letters when I was at the White House. That's what my office produced. And you never want to lose sight of the fact of how impactful that is, just the little gestures like that. And that might have come straight off of his stationery. Maybe he wrote it individually. Oh, are you grabbing it off the side here?
Oh, but this is a letter I got from W when I sent him a copy of 41 to 43.
You're handling it. You got to frame that thing. I'm sure you've got plenty of them.
And he thanked me for sending him a copy. And I have, H.W. was a terrific letter writer. Handwritten notes.
Yeah. And every 4 years, the story of the handwritten note that he left for President Clinton in the Oval Office desk gets passed around. You see that, and it was so eloquent in that letter. And it's passed on to the staff too. I wrote a letter and put it in my desk when I left. So it's really cool. And actually became friends with the person who took my desk. So that was really cool. Yeah. I keep in touch. We're friends on Facebook now. So,
and of course, we're all friends. All of us that have been involved, we're still friends to this day.
Gordon, it's been such a pleasure hearing these stories. Where can people go to learn more about you, connect with you?
So you can go to gcjpr.com, GordonCJamesPublicRelations.com, or you can just reach out to me on Facebook or direct message me. I'd love to hear from everybody, and anybody that we can help, we're happy to help.
And the book, 41 to 43, thank you for sending me a copy. I loved it. Got some great stories in there. Where can people get a copy?
It's not for sale. Just give me a call and I'll mail you one.
Oh, that's great. All right. Gordon, thanks so much.
Thank you, John.
Thank you for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast with John Corcoran. Find out more at smartbusinessrevolution.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list and join the revolution.
Revolution.
And be listening for the next episode of the Smart Business Revolution podcast.